Tonight, Canada signs a sweeping new security pact with the European Union. What's behind the move and what does it mean for our NATO footing and global posture? And we get a European viewpoint, plus a new report calls out Canada's skies. Are flyers paying too much?
And I have my finger in the sports pulse now that the Stanley Cup playoffs are over, with a look at the new CFL season in Canada, and I'm from Mexico, and I'm Eddie Tekalik, looking forward to chatting with everyone.
And from Montreal, I'm Gary MacDonald. Remember, we want to hear from you. Join the conversation and post your thoughts. We will share as many as possible tonight. All right, let's get into it. Prime Minister Mark Carney has been busy in Europe this week, first attending the EU summit, followed by the NATO summit.
You're here among friends. That is very important to us. We have an excellent partnership, two strong democracies bound by historic ties and connected by a trade partnership that is dynamic, fair, and open through CETA. I think it is time to go to the next level, to step up the intensity of our partnership. We do not only want to reaffirm today our partnership and friendship, but also reshape it. And there are lots of topics, from security of supply chains to critical raw materials, from digital services to artificial intelligence. We will sign a security and defense partnership agreement. This is the most comprehensive we've ever concluded. So the short message is, we know we can count on you and you can count on us.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, Monsieur le Président. Now we put some of what we discussed at the G7, what we have worked on over the years, into practice with the security and defense partnership. Ursula, it's crucial. It's crucial for Canada, but I think it also shows a way forward to the world. And the breadth of the ambition, but also the practical implementation of our partnership for the future is fundamental to the future of Canada. And if I may put it in one direction, of course, the Union is, under your leadership, has been moving to an ever closer union. We look forward to moving to an ever closer partnership with the European Union.
Now, later in the day, that deal was sealed.
With the support of the 27 member states, we will take our strategic relationship to an unprecedented level of closeness. That's why today marks a turning point in our history. First, on defense. We have just signed the European Union-Canada Security Defense Partnership. It is a reflection of our mutual commitment to peace, transatlantic security, and deeper cooperation in building defense capabilities. It opens new opportunities for companies on both sides of the Atlantic. While NATO remains the cornerstone of our collective defense, this partnership will allow us to strengthen our preparedness faster and better, to invest more and to invest smarter.
And as the most European of the non-European countries, Canada looks first to the European Union to build a better world. And that's what today is about. It's about building on our triple alignment of values, of interests, and of trust built over the years. And so today, this is a new era of cooperation. Our strategic Canada-EU or EU-Canada strategic partnership for the future will build a new and deeper relationship that brings us closer together, from defense to digital, from supply chains to security. We're launching comprehensive negotiations across multiple areas of cooperation, connection, trade, security, digital, climate. And this will make us both more resilient and more prosperous.
Now, that was followed by the NATO summit, and with all parties agreeing to increase NATO spending, military spending, by 5% by 2035. 3.5% of that, of course, direct military spending, 1.5% military-related items in a very broad sense of the word. Now, during the news or following the summit and reaching that agreement, Prime Minister Carney was asked by a reporter as to what kind of an impact that this would have on Canadians.
First and foremost, we are protecting Canadians. We are protecting Canadians against new threats. I wish we didn't have to, but we do have to, and it is our core responsibility as government. And those threats, we see them, the evolving threat environment, most clearly in the Arctic, but it's also through the Arctic into Canada. And so we're taking our greater responsibilities around that. We have to be clear about what we're doing in order to achieve it. Last point. We're focused on the outcome, the result, protecting Canadians. We're driven by that, not by, with all due respect, sitting in the NATO building, by NATO accountants. And that's part of what's relevant for this 2029 review. We're going to focus on those new threats. We're going to take more of it directly in our responsibility, because they are a responsibility, the threats on our soil, in our marine areas. And where possible, we're going to work with our partners, but we're also going to assess how well we've done, first and foremost to Canadians, whom we serve, but also to our partners. There'll be a review and there'll be an adjustment at that point.
I'm not sure I understood exactly what he said as to how that's going to impact Canadians or what it means for Canadians. Although near the end of it, I got what he was trying to say, I guess, is yes, it sounds like a lot of money, and yes, it is a lot of money, but it's going to be spread out over 10 years, and part of that cost will result in, it will be like an investment, because we will end up recouping some of that investment through sales of various technologies and so on. But it's still, there's something that, like Eddie, you remember last week I raised a flag about the spending without a budget, and we have no idea how this is going to impact you and me as average everyday Canadians as we move forward. And we still don't know, but we do, we hear the Prime Minister committing to another $150 billion or so and going up from there over the next decade. I'm beginning to see a few more flags from a financial standpoint here, and I'm growing just a little bit concerned. When I listen to Carney and really get into it, I can feel a little bit of comfort from time to time, but we're still talking a hell of a lot of money for a country that over the last decade under a previous Liberal Prime Minister who believed that budgets would fix themselves, running up the debt that we've run up. And now here we are, we're making these commitments, and Carney is still saying that, yes, there will be some sacrifices to be made. We don't know what kind of sacrifices. We don't know for how long. We don't know who precisely those sacrifices will impact or how they're going to impact or anything else. I don't know if I can support him much longer through the summer until we get to September, October, whenever the fall budget comes in. I don't know if I can really give him that much more runway. I'm really starting to get concerned about what's coming. Oh, we lost you, Eddie.
How about now?
Perfect.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I was kind of thinking about that too, where he's making not just short-term commitments, which we knew he said he's going to bring it up to the existing level by the end of this year, which was, I think both you and I were happy to see that, because our military sorely needed that kind of spending. But to bring that up to the new thresholds, 2035, you said, you know what? How those decisions over the next 10 years are going to impact Canadians, I think we're just going to have to wait and see. Yes, we have a new agreement with the European Union in terms of developing technologies together, developing strategies against AI and whatnot, where combined between Canadian technical expertise and ingenuity, along with the European one, we're going to be conducting business overseas and working with each other and investing in each other's technology and expertise to actually create a parallel industry on both sides of the ocean. So there is money to be made there. So it's money that Europe is going to be spending our Canadian technologies, us spending money on European technologies and driving some economies. So there's some value there in terms of the companies that'll benefit from that, the employees that'll benefit from that. Now, I hear what you're saying. How does that actually work for industries that are not directly related to the military industry and warfare and weaponry and technology and whatever else? It's really, really hard to say. So how do I take solstice of what Prime Minister Carney is saying right now? Well, if you think about it, Gary, there are countries in Europe that do not have Canada's GDP levels. I mean, sometimes more population than we have, but they're not necessarily reaching our GDP levels. Yet they're still committing to the existing NATO quotas and the new one coming up in 2035. They're going to pay for it somehow. Is it going to be through new innovation, new industry in their countries? I don't know. But what I think, Gary, is, we talked a little bit about it last week. We're all faced with living in a very, very new world. And I mean, no one can argue against that. It's an extremely new and very, very dangerous world that we're living in, and a lot of unpredictability. When's the next conflict going to happen? What is the United States going to be doing with this conflict from one day to the next? We just don't know. And, we talked about it last week that, Canada, following Prime Minister Carney's lead, we have to be more self-sufficient in terms of our defense policies and being able to arm our soldiers, first of all, and second of all, to align ourselves and create military alliances with someone we can depend on and trust, because that's kind of gone in terms of what can we trust the United States to do or not to do when the chips are actually down. When we need military assistance up here for some reason, are we as Canadians going to be held hostage that we have to give something up in order to get American military backing? I really don't know, but I mean, these are questions that I think about. These are questions I hear about and read about online. And just cycling back, it's a very dangerous world, Gary. And you know what? Let's look at the alternative. What if Prime Minister Carney is not committing or has not committed to ramping us up to 2030 by 2035 to meet NATO commitments? If we don't do it, does it leave us open to hostilities? I mean, we talked about it a couple times now. You know what? Hostilities from the United States are possible. What about if Trump's buddy Putin decides to invade Canada from the north? Can we expect the United States to help us out? I don't know. This is where we need to forge new military alliances, which was one of the primary mandates, primary plans on his agenda, Prime Minister Carney's agenda, to go out to NATO and basically express Canada's commitment to the NATO alliance, where we will support each other in growing our military capabilities and then supporting each other in the event we have to execute some military plan of defense somewhere between us and Europe. So it's a real messy world out there, Gary. It's going to get messier, and it's almost it's a necessary evil. Militaries are a necessary evil. So we have to do what we have to do. And yeah, I'm afraid as you are. What is that going to mean to guys like yourself and myself and the regular Joe? It could be consequential. Look, we're not a poor country by any means. We're not a major cash cow like the United States is. But we have to be in a position to be able to take care of take care of ourselves all on our own if we have to, because I don't think we can depend on anybody anymore except ourselves.
Well, no question. Although when you caught the European Union commissioner, she was very, very quick to point out in that clip that we can rely on you and you can rely on us.
Yep.
Really driving that home. And really, this is actually, it establishes a permanent framework for joint security and defense cooperation, and covering everything from cyber, space, maritime security, crisis response, military mobility, hybrid threats, and foreign interference. And it commits to annual defense and security dialogues and collaborative support for the Ukraine. Now, what it does do very quickly is open up access to the European Union Safe Fund. That opens negotiations for Canada to access the EU's Safe Joint Defense Procurement Fund, and that's estimated at $239 billion Canadian dollars. Canada is the first country in the Americas to gain this level of access, and once a technical agreement is completed, Canadian defense firms will be eligible to bid on EU-funded defense contracts. Projects may involve joint procurement with EU partners and partial non-EU sourcing of up to 35% for some items. And Canada can also participate in EU programs to co-develop and co-produce military equipment. Strategic implications for Canadian industry. Canadian companies will gain access to large-scale European defense markets. Joint procurement will reduce per-unit costs, increase competitiveness, and open opportunities for research and development collaboration. And Canadian defense policy may evolve to integrate more closely with European partners, lessening reliance on U.S. sourcing.
Right.
And there's a couple of other things coming out of this. The geopolitical significance. This move diversifies Canada's defense alliances, especially amid uncertainty in U.S. foreign policy, strengthens transatlantic defense ties at a time of global instability and rising geopolitical competition, and builds on Canada-EU economic ties like CETA and aligns with shared values in AI, climate policy, and cybersecurity. And interesting how they did manage to get climate policy worked into this overall pact. So it does open up a lot of opportunity here in the long run for Canadian defense contractors. And then on the outside, because that 1.5% NATO increased funding can be anything from upgrading of ports to airports and telecommunication structures, things like that. So it does open up just a wide range of opportunities for Canadian businesses. Yeah. It's just that right now it's like me going out and making all sorts of commitments, and I don't have a dime in the bank. Talk is cheap. I get it. I still have, as I say, a level of confidence when I listen to some of the key phrasing that the Prime Minister is using. I do have a certain level of confidence, but like I say, it's getting a little tougher now. Hopefully, this is probably the major chunk of funding commitments over for the summer before he hits the barbecue circuit.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that. And one of the things I picked up in what the commissioner was saying and what Prime Minister Carney was saying was, opening up opportunities to develop technologies together and build each other's technologies. that drives right into this whole F-35, and if I believe Boeing is the one that's manufacturing that. That was a clear shot right across the bow of Boeing, if more, and the United States, if anything else, where wow, we have this new agreement between Canada and Europe, right in the middle of Canada's commitment to they've committed to 16 F-35s contractually, with an understanding they're going to go up to 88 aircraft. You know what? We talked about this before. They've got the 16. This opens up tremendous employment opportunities and just really expanding the industry, the manufacturing industry as it pertains to aircraft manufacturing. So, where going with an organization like Saab for their grip and ease, where they will actually have these units built in Canada by Canadians, and it's none of this proprietary stuff where you can't do what you want with your airplane unless you ask permission from the manufacturing country to do upgrades as you want them. Like both you and I know, the F-35s basically I'm sure there's a kill switch somewhere, because we can't do anything without the American military's permission to upgrade this or try that. So why would we want something like that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I heard that, and I'm thinking right off the bat to the F-35s. We've talked about this before. You know what? We committed to 16. We'll pay for your 16, and we'll sell them someplace. I'm sure we can find someplace in the Middle East that'll buy them very quickly, and just get rid of them, and then invest in work with Saab, build these things in Canada. It'll allow us to. I'm not going to say a military superpower, but a military that can take care of its own in itself. It would be something that would make perfect sense to me. I'd rather see that built here by Canadians and buying stuff out of the United States, which at some point may just shut itself off when we really need it to work. So that was one statement that that was one thing that I really stuck to. And
hold that thought for 1 second. Just hold that thought. I just want to catch up on these comments. I feel. Monel says, I feel like he knows of a threat that he can't say yet. Things might also change once Trump is gone. And then we have Joe. There we go. How do we go from 2% to 5%? Sounds to me like he's acquiescing to the orange one.
That too.
Well, all of NATO did, Joe, actually. Trump's been pushing, and even today, he couldn't just let it go. He had to say, we've been paying more than our fair share over the years, and it just isn't right. So, I'm glad to see that we're moving in this direction now. Okay, sorry, I just wanted to catch up on those before we get too far ahead of them.
Yeah, no, and the other thing that really made me proud of the fact that he's representing Canada there is when he actually said during his speech, and I quote, "We're the most European, non-European country of Europe." That's the beauty of our country, Gary. You and I've talked about this. If you want to look at a United Nations country, a huge United Nations country, you don't have to look further than Canada. So when he actually said that, I felt very proud, being an ethnic Slovenian Canadian, that he's making sure that all Canadians are included in this entire statement. And we as the most non-European European country, if you want to call it, being associated with our neighbors overseas where there are close ethnic ties, I think it just conveys a message to all the leaders that are there at the NATO summit that Canada is an international, multinational country. It is today. It will remain that tomorrow. And I was really, really, really proud of him, a proud Canadian, for him actually bringing that up in that statement.
All right. A big week for Carney and Canada in Europe, between the EU and the NATO commitments. That whole security trade pact that we have with the EU, unprecedented. And it's going to be really interesting to see how quickly they can move on this. And brings some hard contracts, some hard proposals to the table, and let's get moving and move forward, because we do need to equip our military. There's no question. Carney made reference again today to the fact that more so than ever, at any point in the history of the country, are we now at risk of being a target, drawn into things even more so, things happening on our soil, whether it's terrorist acts, whatever. We no longer seem to have like that fence, invisible fence around us, the two oceans or the three around us to kind of shield us. So we're in it now, and again, it's everything from hard military action through to AI and other technological warfare. So we're there, and we do have to do our part, and we have to be able to say we can defend ourselves if the need should arise. Although with the pact we've formed with Europe, and I'm sure by the fall he'll be off to Southeast Asia to strengthen ties there as well. So we're building out, and I don't disagree with that. I just would like just some kind of little piece of comfort information coming in about where we are from a financial standpoint, and maybe a little clearer explanation for all of us average Canadians as to how some of the benefits of this new EU pact will play into that and help reduce or control the costs overall.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think what we should do is we do have Christian standing by to get the European side of things and as to how this is all playing out over there. So coming up, we will have the European view of the new Canada-EU Defence and Security Pact. And first, though, if you are looking for a Canadian solution to host your domains and web pages, check out Web Hosting Canada, WHC, located here in Montreal. I've been a customer for 4 years. Service is excellent, pricing competitive, and you can get more information by checking out the link in the description below. Well, over to Europe we go now for a reaction, a viewpoint as to what's been taking place over the last couple of days, because certainly as far as Europe is concerned, it's been a very busy week between the EU summit and also the NATO meeting. And we'll get into a little bit of everything as far as that's involved. Joining us now from Switzerland is our Swiss correspondent, our European correspondent, if you will, and that's Christian Falk. And Christian, good morning to you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's start off with the EU summit and all of the trade possibilities. Canada and the EU signing agreements to open up a number of trade routes, and they cover everything from defense and security through to artificial intelligence and everything in between. What sort of reaction are you seeing and hearing, and how you feel about what's been discussed up to this point as far as this new agreement is concerned?
Very pleased reactions here from the European Union. The meeting between Carney and Ursula von der Leyen, the lead of the European Commission, came right prior to the start of the NATO in Den Haag. It set somehow a sign also directly towards the US. And the way both welcomed each other was significant in terms of friendship and deep partnership, which was not there ever before.
It really does seem to be very much a message as well, especially the European Union and sending a message to the U.S. like, we're done, we're looking at new opportunities, and we're moving on. Is that what you're sensing? And certainly our Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has been looking for new opportunities because he does not want to be so reliant on the U.S. for trade again. So is that what you're sensing from your perspective as well?
It was a direct hint to the U.S., but we're not sure if the U.S. is smart enough to realize that reaction we were giving to them, Like the way von der Leyen and Carney were talking was in a way which just showed like the deep partnership Canada and the European Union now targeting, not only in terms of defense, but also in trade, economy, like we're really building up a new alliance in here, like we were talking not only about like the program, the European Safe program, which is funded with $150 billion just to enlarge in the military here, and they just invited Canada to be part of it. And in return, Canada was also mentioning that they could give access to the European Union on strategic minerals, but also specifically in terms of LNG, which shows no trade flows now between the European Union and Canada. But as you said, like right in the beginning, the tone, like when von der Leyen started the discussion, like really showing the deep partnership between Canada and Europe. Germany especially was very nice to hear, and was actually a sign to the world that there's a new alliance and that we don't want to be reliant on the USA anymore.
Well, certainly from a security standpoint, defense standpoint, we are re-examining, for example, the purchase of the F-35 fighter jets from the U.S. We're looking at, perhaps new submarines. I know Germany, I believe, is pitching new submarines. And, the door is open as far as defense spending because, we've committed to meet our 2% goal by the end of this fiscal year. And now yesterday, the NATO countries agreed to increase it to 5% of GDP by 2035. So there's a lot of money on the table right now for defense spending in both ways.
And we clearly invited and gave access now to Canada to the Europe Safe Procurement Fund, which is, as you said, funded with 150 billion US, and Canada is now part of it. So yeah, like it was a statement before actually Trump and the NATO arrived. And it was a clear statement to them that we're now going other ways. Yeah. And it took a little bit of leverage now also from the US. Let's put it like that.
And that was actually one of my next questions was, what does this mean as far as the US's influence on Europe going forward?
I mean, when you looked at the opening statements of the NATO meeting in Den Haag, like they still try to please and welcome Trump. However, that discussion which von der Leyen and Carney had in advance just set a complete different tone. Like, I think Trump was traveling to Den Haag in a complete different mindset, and then he must have had the surprise of his life when he saw like that Europe and Canada are teaming up in such a way, specifically when we're now talking about the 5% GDP spending on military, but like we're already in it, we're teaming up. We want to be we don't want to be reliant on the US anymore. And that's the point we set here.
And that's the other thing of it from a Canadian standpoint as well, because this deal with the F-35 fighter jets, for example, there are a lot of things when you start digging down through that it's almost like we're not really buying them, we're almost leasing them, and we have very little control over a number of things. I believe there's a clause in there where if we want to make some changes to some of the software, for example, we have to get approval from the US before anything can happen. those kinds of things. And that's like, I don't know, especially given the political climate in the US and the way it's going, and it doesn't show any signs of easing, that to have those kinds of restrictions on how you handle your own security seems to be something that just goes against the grain.
You won't have this issue with German submarines we will deliver.
I know you will, for sure. So where do you see it going from here? We have a lot of this positive talk and agreements signed. Can you see the actual wheel starting to turn fairly quickly here?
Yeah, I mean, we're already in it, like they said, like they have an agreement signed. So like this happened before Trump even could say hello. And I think that set the sign. And this is more interesting for the European Union because it's something Canada is a reliable partner. And it's not only about who has the strongest military and the biggest GDP, but like in terms of trade partners. But here we clearly see that we have a reliant partner on our side, and this is what counts. And this is what the US lost everywhere. Like when we talk in Europe about the US, everyone is complaining we cannot rely on those guys anymore. They're unpredictable, and this is not what we need, specifically in those times where we see the threat from Russia, we see threat from Iran. Like we really need strong partnerships here in Europe and transatlantic partnerships as well. And as I said, Canada was already present in Latvia, very strong. There was since the 2000s, together with the European Union, they were training. Canada was training so many troops in the Ukraine already. Like they gave a lot of their energy and their money and their how do you say their sources to the European Union and to our partners here.
All right, now very quickly on the Iran thing, there is a growing level of concern here in Canada, and I'm sure in the US as well. What about in Europe as far as potential retaliation from Iran over what happened on the weekend with the bombing of their nuclear sites? Do you see, is there a growing concern about a higher level of potential terrorist activity in Europe?
It might be, but you need to look into the country. Iran itself was a free country until the 70s, 80s, and then it turned into a I don't know how to say it in English, totalistic country under the strict regime. And the people in there, they're really modern Western minded, and a lot of them are just fed up with the government there. And for them, I think that the regime would be gone is actually in interest of everyone. It got weakened, and we know if the US really wants to bring it to an end, they can bring it to an end. What we don't understand here in Europe is the US starts something and then is not bringing to an end, but presenting itself that they're the big peacekeepers there. But if you start something like this, just then bump it into the ground, and not start it, and then stop in the middle of it. So yeah, in terms of terrorist attacks, I mean, we're used to it over the last years here, but the concerns are not too big at this stage. Yeah.
All right, Christian, thank you for bringing us up to date from the European perspective. Christian Falk is our regular contributor as to what's happening in Europe and how they're seeing what we're doing over here in North America, especially on the Canadian side of the 49th parallel. Thank you, Christian.
Thanks, Gary.
Okay, so...
You know what, Gary, before we move on? If the Germans are going to sell us submarines, I can assure you one thing. They're going to be built well. They're going to last for 100 years.
German engineering, as Christian
German engineering.
Say.
Oh, yeah.
All right, just before we move on, we have some comments. I want to try and get caught up again. I want to get behind. Okay, so Joe says, That's exactly my point about the 5% we were discussing earlier. They easily come up with funds for the military, but what about healthcare, hospitals, our aging population, and the elderly, CPP, OAS? All great questions, and in all things that need money in this country, no question about it. However, our military is so far behind now, and we are under so many threats from all sides that we really do have to pick up and start re-equipping, rebuilding the military in this country. We depend on the military for a number of things, including firefighting, wildfires, with that, floods, other natural disasters. So we really do. There are ways and means of looking at healthcare in the hospitals and getting a better return on investment for the money that we are investing. And it may mean some changes that will, upset a few people along the way, but we have to be able to show that the money that we are investing, and frankly, right now, as far as our healthcare system is concerned, the money that we're investing, we're not getting any kind of a return on investment, very minimal at best. And all we keep doing is just throwing more money at it with no accountability. But that's a whole other show, and we can get into that without too much trouble. Okay, and Greg says Mark is truly showing statesmanship at the highest level, partners. He definitely is a statesman, no question. Joe comes back and says, EU all the way, US, you've had your day, bye-bye. Deborah says, so nice to have someone from Europe reporting on Europe. Oh, Joe's back with one more thing. Under Trump, the US has completely lost its moral compass. Google, alligator, Alcatraz, appalling and disheartening.
Yeah.
There are no words for that. That really sums it up, for sure. And the loss of the moral compass, yeah, like it's gone and buried somewhere.
Yeah.
It's gone. So anyway, we have to keep rolling along. I don't want to get behind because we do have limited time tonight. So up next, we have Airline Turbulence. From that Airline Turbulence, would Canadians benefit from allowing foreign carriers to serve domestic routes? Having issues with your cable-based internet service? Check out eBox's fiber-based service, competitive pricing, and solid service. We've been using eBox since last December, issue-free. You can get more information by clicking the affiliate link below. All right, let's take wing here. The Federal Competition Bureau has released a report on airline competition in Canada. Among other things, it is calling for an aviation policy that prioritizes competition, easing of foreign ownership restrictions, and reform of user fee and infrastructure funding, and addressing northern and remote needs. Not surprising, our biggest carrier, Air Canada, is disputing the findings, claiming the market already offers enough competition and passenger choice, while the Canadian Airport Council supported competition goals, but cautioned against relying on foreign ownership, instead urging tailored strategies for smaller airports. Okay, so I did do up a graphic. I want that stop. There. I did do up a graphic here. And let me see. Yeah. First of all, the report says one new competitor on a route can reduce fares by an average of 9%, which is interesting. New airlines face persistent challenges, and some of those challenges, high costs, limited landing slots, fragile viability, and economic shocks. Because we are a country of only 40 million people, and our population is centered in the very lowest spot of the country. And air travel is essential for northern and remote communities. And yet, what the report says, the services are scarce and fares extremely high. For example, anywhere between $1,000 and $5,000 per trip. Gee, that sounds like you're flying from Montreal to New Brunswick. $1,000. Yeah. So, are we being gouged? You know, basically, we have two main domestic carriers, Air Canada and WestJet. And then you have your regional carriers, which are all offshoots, aside from a couple of very small independent airlines serving remote areas. But the so-called regional carriers are owned and operated, leased out to other companies by Air Canada and WestJet.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So again, it's like almost like our national telecommunications. We have Bell, Rogers, and TELUS. 3. And they're all priced in around the same. And if one runs a sale, the other one runs a sale at the same price. Instead of maybe a little bit lower kind of thing. You know, there's no real competitive spirit. So are we being gouged? I understand that operating an airline in Canada with all of the fees and everything is expensive, and they're, you know, more so than in other countries, such as a market like the US. But no shareholder in Air Canada is complaining loudly about their dividends and what their shares are valued at. I haven't heard anything from WestJet shareholders, and they're owned now by a large capital venture firm. That's not complaining. So what's going on here? Like I say, when I look at $1,000 round trip between Montreal and, you take your choice, St. John or Fredericton, that's, you know, I paid less than that a few years ago for that round
That's
trip.
insanity. That's insanity.
Yeah, for a 1 hour flight. A 1 hour flight. So I don't get it. I really do think that we do need some more competition. And I think what will happen is you will see some companies come in. If we open it up, some companies will come in and they'll give it a go, but it won't go very far. It'll be like 3 or 4 other the discount Canadian-based airlines that tried to make a go of it. Just even in the last 4 or 5 years, like, you know, we've had Lynx.
Mm-hmm.
There's another one similar to that. Flair, is Flair still flying? Flair flying?
No. I think Flair ceased to operate. Flair ceased to operate. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I know they were teetering on the edge.
Or WestJet acquired somebody. That's Sunwing. It was Sunwing.
Yeah, they acquired Sunwing. Yeah, and then you've got Air Transat that's you know, doing okay with its vacation flights, and it does pick up some regular passengers as well on some of those vacation flights and going to Europe and that. So,
Gary, you look back. I mean, you look back 30 years. I mean, now we have Air Canada. WestJet is not relatively new. They've been around for a while, but let's call a mature kid on the block. But man, think 30 years back. I'm thinking about my days in aeronautical telecommunications. I mean, we had Canadian Pacific, we had Wardair, we had Nordair. I mean, there was the Quebec. There's so much competition in Canada, and then I believe when the airline industry got deregulated, like further deregulated in North America, led by the United States, you get a lot of American interests that start buying up routes that Canadian airlines used to have. Like I believe Canadian Pacific was taken over by American Airlines, if I'm not mistaken, or they got heavily involved with American Airlines to buy their route. American Airlines got were bought routes that Canadian Pacific owned. So that was a start of the demise of Canadian Pacific, of CP, and that I guess that's a little bit of a fear. So I'm saying those were the good old days. We had a lot of competition. Prices were competitive. You know what? You could probably fly out to Eastern Canada for a fraction of the price of what you and I would pay now. That's because we had a lot of airlines operating in Canada. And with the deregulation of the airline industry in North America, everything changed. And all you're left with is the heavy hitters. Same thing in the United States. You're looking at Eastern Airlines, but that was basically screwed up by Trump. So let's get on to some other airline. You look at Republic Airways. You look at Midland Airways in the United States. A lot of airlines just disappeared. Pan American Airlines. That just disappeared off the face of the earth. And now in the United States, you're left with 4 major carriers with a few regionals. And in Canada, you have 2 major airlines serving the entire country, being Air Canada and WestJet, and that's it. So, okay, great. Let's get some more competition in here. I don't think we're going to get that with the startup companies because WestJet and Air Canada are going to do everything possible to make their lives miserable, first of all, right? Second of all, getting international money vested in launching airlines in Canada, like you said, Gary, they're going to have to get landing rights. They're going to have to negotiate with the governments here. They're going to have to fight against Air Canada, which probably chairs majority of the boards across the entire country. Going to make it very difficult. But then, have we not learned the lesson of what happened 30 years ago with all this international interest in the routes that we have throughout the country? So what? Air Canada might cease to exist, or who knows what? How do you get competition? I don't think we can do it with just regional carriers. It has to be a major carrier right across the country to give a run for the money for Air Canada, to Air Canada. And like you said at the beginning, as soon as this report came out, Air Canada were the first ones to cry foul. Well, the big bad bully is a little afraid right now, and they're crying foul because Air Canada is a big bad bully. And if you really think about it in terms of their monopoly across the country, as prolific as WestJet has become, and Air Transat on the international side of things, they're still the big bad boy here in Canada, and they set the stage, they set the price, and they've got enough manpower and equipment to put aircraft on any route and charge whatever the hell they want. And it's very sad that our quote unquote national carrier makes it extremely difficult to fly across the country economically, make it very difficult to fly up north. Like you said, 80% of our population is within 100 miles of the American border or so. What about the rest of our country? I mean, there's a lot of people living above that, further north, and they pay a lot just to get a loaf of bread because it costs so goddamn much for a flight to carry all this stuff up there, which I think is just absolutely ridiculous. So, you know what, Gary? I don't know. Does the Canadian government need to step up and get some sort of regulation in terms of operating an airline in Canada that you need to do A, B, and C, and then you can do what you want? I don't know what the answer is, Gary. Look, both you and I agree it's too freaking expensive to fly in the country. We're only 40 million people. Will people travel more if prices are less? I believe they will. I'll fly more throughout the country. I mean, I do a lot of traveling around the world, and it's cheaper for me to fly to Europe than to fly to Toronto sometimes. It makes zero sense. What about our European neighbors? I'm sure they would love to cross the country, gallivant the country, but once they land in Montreal, and then all of a sudden, all right, what are my options to fly out to Western Canada? Air Canada and WestJet. Oh my God, look at the price of this. I can tour all of Europe for that money. They have to make it easy for Canadians. By making it easy for Canadians, Gary, they're going to open up a new level of revenue from our European friends and friends from around the planet landing in Canada and being able to explore Canada. If the prices come down, they just don't make sense, Gary. They're just way too expensive right now.
Yeah, and the way that they jump just all of a sudden, boom, like, okay, what? What's going on here? What are you offering for me or to me that is worth that much more money other than a cramped seat? And, like even...
And a bag of dry pretzels.
Yeah, even some of the business class offerings are not great compared to what they used to be. So, and look at what you're paying for business and first class. Like it's, you need to mortgage the house in some cases.
So if you cycle back to your first questions, are we kind of getting ripped off on high end money? Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, no question about it.
So let's catch up on a couple of more comments here. Greg, on the healthcare front, what is worth noting is Nova Scotia just signed a deal with Lebanon to try Lebanese physicians and 12 physicians from Lebanon to Nova Scotia over the next several months, all fully trained. Didn't the College of Physicians and Surgeons in New Brunswick just roll out a program similar to that, Greg, I think, in the last 2 months? And I think they had 6 doctors or 12 doctors, and they had to go through a certain level to bring their training to make sure that they were meeting all of the criteria for a license in New Brunswick. And now they have, and they're being, I guess, put into various areas of the province. And if the program proves to be successful, I think you're going to see more of it. But I think if you check the College of Physicians and Surgeons website, I think there's a piece on there about that program. And more like how many people do we have in this country right now driving Uber or Uber Eats or working, hustling in restaurants and that
to make ends meet?
Yeah, and they are doctors and nurses, and they just need to bring we just have to figure out how we're going to bring them in and bring their level up to our standards as far as the training is concerned. They have the basics. It's just a lot of it is just a matter of plugging in some of the holes in the paperwork more than anything else. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, Greg, for sure. Monel comes in with, oh my God, it would be so wonderful to have options for flights. Maybe we could travel in Canada more. There would be a lot to be said for that, and I have an idea. And she said, I don't understand something. Back in the 70s and 80s, we had a lower population, but many more airlines. Why? Because more people were using them?
Yeah,
because
true. How true is that?
Flights were reasonable. Joe says, we're definitely being gouged domestically. You can fly cheaper internationally than a short haul route domestically. It's amazing. Okay, and let's see. Monel comes back. If we open our routes, should be reciprocated by other countries, and Air Canada can do business elsewhere. Okay, and let's see. Deborah's here with what happened with the airlines also happened with grocery and other businesses. It's corporate restructuring where the focus changed to focusing on the shareholders rather than the employees. And, there are some corporations in particular like that really is the case. And Greg says, yes, but not sure of the details, so it's clear that there is a move afoot to ensure fully trained, credentialed folks. Absolutely. No question, Greg. I think we're slowly catching on to that whole scenario. All right, on the airline side of things, I think we are in agreement. I think that as a government, the federal government took a good step this year with this, what are they calling it, boost program? Something like that, where
Right.
the reduced prices for museums and in some cases no charge for some parks and different things. Trying and 18
Via rail.
get in free. Yeah, via rail. There's a deal for, I think it's 18 and under with travel at no charge. So these are things that are going in the right direction, which in turn, if we travel our country, after your first trip, you're going to feel much more a part of the rest of the country, like you're going to feel much more united. And why we have not picked up on that forever is beyond me. Even if you give us a freaking tax break, we can write off a portion of our vacation costs like New Brunswick did during the pandemic. They were offering rebates on different things up to a certain amount. And it was proved to be extremely successful. And I don't know why they didn't keep it after the pandemic, after everything needed. There are all sorts of things available. And I think part of, not only are we coming together and we've united as a country thanks to what's happened south of the border and the way we've been treated, and I think we need to build on that to make us even all feel much more Canadian. There's a good piece on CBC written by from Quebec, and his parents were bilingual. His father was Anglo, and his mother was French. And over the years, they worked together after first meeting, and it's quite a story. And he moved out west. He attended university out west, the son, and is out there now. But he's talking about how much more now he feels a total part of the country, a total Canadian. It's on the CBC News website, and just scroll down through, you'll find it. I can't remember the title of it, but I read it last week, and I really found it interesting to get that kind of perspective. Okay, up next, we've got the much anticipated Sports Pulse. Eddie's here. Eddie, what's grabbing your attention?
Well, you know what? I'm suffering from post Stanley Cup, the depression syndrome. So hockey is over. Stanley Cup's been banged up and broken, but they've actually fixed it before the parade. So congratulations to the NHL and the Florida Panthers. What's caught my attention lately? Well, you know what? Before I get on to the CFL, just a little bit about the National Basketball Association, the recent championship. I love watching sports, any sort of sports organization, and their championship run in the finals go 7 games, which it did between the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Indianapolis Pacers. Oklahoma City Thunder won it in 7 games. And they won the last game in great fashion. I mean, after the first half, it was 48 for Indiana, and Oklahoma City was 48 to 47 after the first half. And then the Oklahoma City Thunder just opened it up. They scored 34 points over Indiana's 20, and they won 103 to 91. So congratulations to the Oklahoma City Thunder. And I'm not a basketball fan per se, but what's of interest to me to bring up in the show, Gary, is we actually had 3 Canadians in this final. I mean, basketball is all Americana, but it's really great to see Canadians do extremely well. 2 of them played for the Oklahoma City, and the other one played for the Pacers. So we have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a native from Hamilton, MVP of the NBA basketball finals. What an accomplishment. This kid scored over 30 points in 5 of the games. Very, very critical. So what a contribution. MVP of the NBA finals. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a Hamilton native. And then we also had Luguentz Dort from Montreal, who also plays for the Thunder. I believe he's a Montreal North boy. So congratulations to him. And then runner-up, Benedict Mathurin, who played for the Pacers. He's also a Montreal boy, and I believe he's also from Montreal North. And he played in Park Extension for the Sun Youth Sunners, believe it or not. So great for Canadian sports, and you know what? A lot of our kids can look up to these great Canadian young Canadian men. In terms of, you know, anything is possible. You can play in the NBA if you work hard at it. So really, really good story. Had to have 3 Canadians in that, and a Canadian in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander winning the MVP for the finals. Now for the CFL. Yes, believe it or not, I'm one of the few who prefers the Canadian Football League game to the NFL game. No question about it. It's always fast-paced and fast-moving. And this year, my Montreal Alouettes, yes, I have my Montreal Alouettes, Gary, they're off to a 3-0 start. So we're looking at Danny Machocha's rebuild. He took over the reins, I think, 5 years ago, where we were an absolute disaster. I was a 17-year Montreal Alouette season ticket holder. And after Anthony Calvillo got hurt, I got tired of the Montreal Alouettes being down 35-0 by halftime, and I have to leave because it was just too boring. So, yeah, I got rid of those tickets, haven't renewed them. And you know what? The last 4 years, Alouettes have been extremely competitive. They won the Grey Cup 2 seasons ago. Last season, they lost to the dastardly Toronto Argonauts in a game filled with penalties to the Montreal Alouettes, and we lost that game. And Toronto went on to win the Grey Cup last year. But the Montreal Alouettes this year are 3-0 in their start, and they're very quickly becoming the old beasts of the East. They're 3-0. Ottawa's won 1 game out of 3, and Hamilton, Toronto have had 1 zippo. So yeah, looks like hopefully their heads don't get too fat, and they lose in the games that actually mean moving forward to the Grey Cup. So long season left, good start 3-0, and David Alexander, who's the starting quarterback, he was the backup quarterback last year, is doing extremely well. Along with Marc-Andre Ducoy, who's one of the most popular players on the Alouettes team, being a local Quebecer. And we also have Sean Thomas Erlington, who's the featured running back this year. And Sean Thomas Erlington actually was playing on the same team with Alex at my stepson Alex in university for the University of Montreal Carabin. So good for the Alouettes to get some local boys here. And they're doing extremely well. And out west, we have Saskatchewan that's up 3 games. They've won 3 games and lost none. And they have old Trevor Harris, the quarterback who led us to the Grey Cup 2 seasons ago in Montreal, playing for them, so he's doing well. And then we have, British Columbia Lions. They're 1-2. And the reason I bring up British Columbia Lions because they're Joe F's beloved British Columbia Lions. So, Joe, I really hope out in Vancouver they'll pick up the pace and maybe get you to renew your season tickets as well. So far on top of the heap, Gary, we have the Montreal Alouettes in 3-0 and the Saskatchewan Roughriders at 3-0. And should be a very interesting season. I'm looking forward to it.
I'll just throw this out quickly, and maybe it's something we can discuss at a later date. But what do you think of an expansion team in Atlantic Canada?
The Nova Scotia Schooners. You know what? I am so behind that because, you know what? Now's a good time to do it. Just carrying on in terms of further developing a national identity. I mean, we've talked about it through the stuff that's going through the United States and threats of annexation. It's just created a higher sense of Canadian identity and nationalism. We talked about Air Canada and maybe, for them to drop their prices for Canadians to be able to visit each other more often, coast to coast, to further strengthen our national identity. And you know what, Gary? A football team out in the Maritimes would do that as well. Because, especially in the smaller centers in Canada, attendance to the football games is very, very heavy. Everyone goes to watch the football games. And I think having the Halifax Schooners actually play, and I think as a matter of fact, they're negotiating space to actually build a multi-purpose stadium. It's one of those situations where if you build it, they will come. And I think the government the governments out in Western Canada are looking at funding, helping to fund a stadium that would be considered multi-purpose. We have the Canadian Soccer League; they play out there, so it makes perfect sense. They build that stadium. I'm sure they're going to get a Canadian Football League team out there, and it would be great. People can identify with it out from Nova Scotia, looking New Brunswick, we're looking PEI, we're looking in Newfoundland. Guaranteed they're going to get a huge fan base, and we're probably going to become their biggest rivalries here in Montreal, Gary. So we'll have to fly out there and fight with people there.
Well, Halifax is
while we're holding a Moosehead beer in our hands.
Absolutely. Yeah. Halifax is the population center for a team. Moncton would argue, we were pegged the fastest growing city in Canada last year, and that city has taken off big time. But still, and you know what? They are in a good spot in the fact that they could draw from PEI no problem. It's a hop, skip, and jump, especially with the bridge. New Brunswick and parts of Nova Scotia, and it's only about a 3.5 hour drive now from Halifax to Moncton, if that. So Moncton could make an argument, but Halifax really, for the population base, is the spot where it should go, and it's very easy to travel to Halifax from elsewhere as well, as far as going by car. Flying, well, that's a whole other.
Yeah, that's a whole other.
Yeah,
it's a whole other show again.
yeah, exactly. And train service. If you live on the eastern side of New Brunswick, okay, you get a train through a couple of times a week, passenger train. PEI has no trains at all, and the rest of Nova Scotia doesn't have train service, and the rest of New Brunswick, no passenger train service. So you're either going to drive yourself, or they do, like the bus deals that include a night or 2 nights in Halifax. So I know that a lot of the exhibition games that they've played in Moncton and Halifax, and way back when in St. John, they had great crowds coming out for the game.
Much sold out, yeah.
Yeah.
Even their university games out there, the Acadia Axemen. You have the St. Mary's Huskies. I mean, football in Eastern Canada is extremely popular, and usually those games are sold out in their stadiums. So the interest is genuinely there. So, that was a great question. Should we get a CFL team in Halifax? I'm as passionate about them getting a team as the Quebec Nordiques and the National Hockey League getting a return there of that franchise. So, absolutely. I'm all for it.
Okay. All right. And with that, I guess we should wrap it up. It's been a busy night. I want to thank you for joining us tonight. And if you're watching the replay or the on-demand segments later, keep the conversation going and leave a comment below. That, along with liking, sharing, and subscribing, help to expose our channel and live stream to more people just like you. Help us expand the conversation. Night Talk returns in 7 days. I'm Gary MacDonald. Good night.
Good night, everybody.